truly, got it, okay, has truly, put up with me being a weekend wife for 20 years. And he wants to spend some time enjoying what life we have left. So my deal was that I would come home. So I'm going to be here with all of you to be able to see you more frequently. And I'm going to be busy. I'm going to be involved in the community. I think you know that one of the things I want to do is create a foundation for San Mateo County, because the Peninsula Community Foundation was merged with the Silicon Valley Foundation some, I don't know, 15 years ago. And for 10 years, that foundation was committed to contributing to San Mateo County, and then basically it left. And so we've got lots of needs in this county that go unanswered, lots of nonprofits that get no support from the so-called Silicon Valley Foundation. And so I want to create one that's local, that's here, and that will be there for all of us. So that's one of the things that I'll be doing. Now, there's lots of hands going up, so I'm happy to respond to questions that you have. But I also have one more year, and I'm going to spend it, as you might imagine, getting as much done as I possibly can, and then continuing to speak out when I think things are right or wrong in our community. So I'm not going anywhere.
Yay. All right, so let me remind everybody the rules for questions. Please use your raise hand to get yourself into the queue. You've got 1 minute, and we will mute you if you are continuing to talk after a minute. We want to try and get as many questions in as possible. So the first one up is Alice Smith.
Hi.
And otherwise, please mute yourself when you're not talking.
Hi, thank you very much. What we'd like to know is what's your best advice for trying to move the senators who are resisting ending the filibuster for civil rights in order to get your original HR 1, now SB 2724 and SB 4 passed?
Well, Alice, the problem is Joe Manchin, right? So he has said this morning that he would be willing to amend the filibuster, requiring that people be on the floor and that it be a majority of those on the floor at the time. I don't think that's going to get us anything. And I have looked now at the 19 states and the over 34 laws that have been passed. And some of them are sinister, some of them are not, but some of them are truly sinister. And you heard probably today when Attorney General Garland spoke about how the most fundamental role that they have played over decades was preventing the Jim Crow laws from taking place in many of these states. And that was really stripped from the Attorney General in the Shelby case that was determined by the Supreme Court back in, I think it was 2013 or 2014. So I think that I'm always quite upfront. I don't think we're going to get it. I really don't think it's going to happen. I think the modification that Joe Manchin is referring to would still get us to 60. I mean, I don't see us. I don't see us amending the filibuster based on what he said today. And I think the filibuster, as you all know, is not in the Constitution. It was a creation in the early to mid 1900s, and it was again an effort to allow segregation to persist. It's really been racist in its development, and now we're seeing it being used again in a manner that is promoting racism.
Thank you. All right. Next question is coming from Lynn.
Hi, Jackie. I first met you, this is going back a long time, at a National Women's Political Caucus meeting. I think it was in Belmont, and you had your little boy there who was a toddler. I don't know what year that was.
Well, it probably was 30 years ago because now he's 33 years old.
Oh, there you go. I'm calling because the federal government is trying to privatize Medicare, and they're creating these DCEs, or direct contract entities, that would basically privatize Medicare, in turn have a lot of Medicare Advantage type plans. Pramila, the first letter sent was by Katie Porter in May. Pramila Jayapal, in the meantime, has sent a new letter to all Congress people to sign on to this, to tell the federal government to stop these DCEs from happening, because they would ruin traditional Medicare.
And is it a question, or tell me what?
Yes, have you gotten the letter and have you signed on?
I have not signed on yet, but I am not supportive of, DCEs have a benefit only if you're going to enhance quality and make sure that there's not defensive medicine being practiced. And I don't think there's much in these DCEs right now that would provide quality as much as it is going to restrict in the long run access. So I haven't signed on to the letter, but I'm not supportive of DCEs either.
All right, next up is Bill. There you go.
Representative Jackie Speier, my congressperson for better part of my life. I just want to say real quickly, you first came into my soul so many years ago when Leo Ryan was still representing me, and I knew you were his aide, and you went to Grenada, and ever since then my soul has just felt very deeply about you, and I'm so happy that you were able to survive that and come back and be so inspirational to all of us as a political representative in our community. I just wanted to tell you that. My question simply is, recently Speaker Pelosi made some comment about conflict of interest ethics and Congress people being able to continue to have investments in stocks and things of that sort. And I want to know just what your advice is at this point, what we can do as constituents to try and improve the ethics within Congress around this issue.
So thank you, Bill. I actually think that what we should do is not allow members of Congress to trade in stocks. I think we should all be subject to being in funds. I wouldn't be opposed to having us all be required to be in a blind trust. Now, having said that, full disclosure, I have a couple of stocks that are in an IRA that I've had for 25 years, and I've never traded them. They just sit there. So I have a few stocks, but that's it. Everything else I have is in funds, and I don't trade. So I would be supportive of Elizabeth Warren's legislation, which would prevent all of us from trading in stocks and require that we all be put into mutual funds or other settings in which we don't have any kind of ability to trade at all. You know, I'm kind of stunned by the amount of money that some of these members trade in, and to trade in stock with the amount of money that they're talking about, it's almost like a full-time job. So I want to know when they're doing the job they were elected to do. That's why I think we would be better off if we were all required to, you know, either have a blind trust or be in mutual funds only.
And Madam Chair, if I could ask a question on behalf of Mr. Mukabahai, and I I apologize, I'm going to mispronounce his name. He isn't able to access his mic. And so I promised him I would read his question. And he said, foremost, he wanted to tell you, oh, how very much he admires you and appreciates your work. And that's making me cry. So his question is, how are you going to continue your much needed and appreciated work for gender equality, especially reproductive rights and freedom from male violence, but also a tax system that doesn't subsidize one earner families and penalize two earner families, AKA joint filing? So I personally don't understand that, but hopefully you do.
I think he's talking about what has been referred to as the marriage penalty. In terms of my work on reproductive health issues, on sexual assault issues, on gender equity issues, I intend to continue to be a spokesperson for those issues. I don't know what form that's going to take. I don't know if I'll be able to get appointed to some committee or commission at some point that would allow me to use that as a platform. But I can't say it often enough. I'm not going away, and I'm not going to have my mouth wired shut. So I'll still be around and still speaking out. As for the tax code, and I guess what he's talking about is
and I apologize, even worse than my mispronouncing her name is that her gender is a she, and I do apologize to her about that.
Okay.
So sorry.
So the marriage, it cuts both ways. Sometimes some people look at it and see it as a penalty for marriage. You could talk to Katie Porter, who, as a single head of household, feels that she's being discriminated against in the tax structure. So I don't have a good answer for you on that. I guess since I'm married, I'm subject to a marriage penalty as well, but I think it cuts both ways is my answer.
Thank you. All right, next up is Elsa.
Apologies for unmuting. Hi. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jackie, for everything you have done and the trajectory of your influence and the depth of your convictions. None of us will ever forget. So thank you so much. A group of us have started something called Fix in San Mateo County, which is a group concerned about some of the stats coming out of the sheriff's office. Not that the sheriff's office is coming out with them, but that have gone through the government. And they include things like 3 taser deaths for unarmed people of color in 1 year, 9 times as many Blacks being arrested as whites in a county that only has 2.7% Blacks. And that ratio is the second most egregious in the entire country after Oklahoma City. And I'm just curious if this is very much a local issue, of course, San Mateo County. Do you know anything about this? And yes, I know you're federally based, but because you are also coming back, and mostly because you have such influence, could we visit you to show you this data and help get your support or your suggestions even as we go forward, trying to get a civilian oversight board, which is now part of the law and supported in California state?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk to you about the issue. This is, if it's, let's just leave it at that. I'm happy to talk to you about the issue, and we'll set up a time in the office where you can come and talk to me about it. I think it's a serious concern. I also think that what we have seen is a need for more training, because a number of these persons of color were also persons with disabilities and were not assessed properly at the time as having a developmental disability, and therefore were, I think, tragically treated differently.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll call.
Thank you. All right, next up is Mike Caggiano.
Hello. Yeah, I was wondering with Ro Khanna and I think Ilhan Omar have been taking up the cudgels for vacating the charges against Julian Assange. And they had a very good show on I think last month with John Kiriakou, who was another truth teller and took the price for it. You know, he paid I think almost just 23 months in prison for basically telling America we torture. And Assange is basically a journalist, you know, news feed. And somehow he may not be the sweetest guy. You may not like him, may not care for him. But I feel he's sort of a New York Times with a funny beard now. And I think 8 years in prison is enough. The man, his life is basically ruined like most whistleblowers. They have their careers and lives basically ruined for being truthful to the rest of us. So do you think you might join with Ro and Ilhan and whoever else might be trying to vacate these charges?
No, the answer is no, Mike.
No? Naughty,
And-
naughty.
And the reason why is because I serve on the Intelligence Committee and I know information that you don't know.
I see. Well, what about John Kiriakou and Snowden and Drake? I mean, all these people you feel have done serious damage to our security by telling what
Edward
they.
Snowden has, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
All right.
I mean, I believe in the First Amendment. I believe in the importance of journalists being able to protect their sources. I think it's an interesting question as to whether or not Sean Hannity should be forced to come before the Select Committee. Now, some would argue that he's not coming forward. He's not being asked to come forward for his journalistic activities, but because of his emails to persons within the White House. I don't know if that is persuasive enough, but I'm very concerned about journalists around the world and protecting them. I've been on all kinds of legislation to castigate those regimes that have punished journalists. I think Saudi Arabia and what they did to Khashoggi is reprehensible, and the fact that we continue to have a relationship with that country, I think is very troubling. But that's sort of where I'm at.
All right. Next question is Rajiv.
Hi, Congresswoman Speier. I'm a huge fan. Really admire you for the courage with which you've lived your life and the integrity you've brought to Congress. So thank you for your incredible service. My question is, you said that you are skeptical that voting rights would pass, the voting rights bill would pass the Senate. What would be your recommendation for us progressives, Democrats? What actions can we take, assuming that doesn't pass, to help make sure that votes, that people get the right to vote and that their votes are counted fairly?
Fair, safe, and secure. That's what we want. And I think that we have to break up HR 1. I think if we break it up into smaller pieces, there's a greater likelihood that we can find common ground with a number of Republicans. Because the issue here with HR 1 now is, can we bust open the filibuster? And basically, Joe Manchin has said no. I mean, he's going to tinker around the edges, but basically he's not willing to. Now, the irony is that if the Senate is regained by the Republicans, what do you think the first thing Mitch McConnell is going to do? He's going to get rid of the filibuster. But I think we can break it up. Should we basically say that Election Day is a holiday? Is that something we can all agree on? can we all agree on, I mean, vote by mail is probably, although we have vote by mail in California now for every election. Do you know that? Thanks in part by both Kevin Mullen and Mark Berman. But there's a great deal on the Republican side, aversion to that, because that means more people are going to vote. And God forbid that more people vote. I mean, it's very twisted, isn't it? But I think there's ways of breaking up HR 1 and getting parts of it through.
Do you think we'll have time to break it up and get that passed in time to impact the 2022 elections? One of the things that really troubles me about this is if we don't address the inequities, especially in some of the Republican states, Republican-dominated states, where the Republican legislatures are being very, one-sided in their approach to this, to election laws, that will impact the U.S. Congress and the House of Representatives and the state legislatures for the next decade.
We'd
And
like
that's
to
a very
remind,
long time.
we'd like to remind people to keep their comments to 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, so I will just answer that very quickly. I mean, the gerrymandering that goes on now, not here in California, but around the country, really emanated from a decision made by the Republicans back in 2010 to focus on state legislatures. And the result of doing that has given them the ability to draw lines that now have placed a lot of Democrats in seats where they're running against each other in states like Illinois and Michigan. So, they're better at the long game than we are, unfortunately. And both in terms of what they did back in 2010, and then more recently, what they've done in the last year in terms of passing bills in these states that will potentially assist them in their efforts of limiting those who are Democrats from being able to vote. Okay, I think we've got time for maybe one more question.
Okay, Nancy?
I'll be quick.
then-
And Jackie, we're going to miss you in Congress, but we're thrilled to have you back local. Speaking of local, Elsa asked about sheriff oversight, and I wanted to ask about the local sheriff race. If you would consider endorsing the local candidate, Christina Corpus, who's campaigning on transparency, integrity, and listening to the community.
So I haven't endorsed yet in many races. I'm going to meet with her and talk with her. I'm no fan of Mr. Bolanos, but I will have to meet with her first to determine whether or not I'm going to endorse.
Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Thank you
All right.
all. Great to be with you.
All right, Jackie, so much. We're going to miss you so much in Congress, but we're going to be really happy to have you back home. And we'd love to have you come back to talk to the club when you're retired, when you're starting your new events.
Okay,
And
great.
and here's the 2022. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, that was way too short, way too short. We could have asked probably a lot more questions. We'll be heading on to some club business next and talking about our task forces. Before people go, I want to just reiterate some of the events happening tomorrow. We've got San Mateo, Peace Action, and Raging Grannies are at San Mateo at the Bank of America on El Camino and 3rd Avenue. And is Alice, can you tell us again the Palo Alto?
Yes, at noon, people from the League of Women Voters are going to be standing on the corners, the 4 corners of Page Mill and El Camino with signs.
Great. Any other tomorrow events, January 6th events that because we'll go to other announcements afterwards.
I'm so sorry. Can I just ask, Alice, you said Page Mill, not Embarcadero?
Page Mill and El Camino.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
I had thought it was
All right.
Embarcadero too, but it's not.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
there is an event in San Mateo, and Mike, if you're still on, could you give some information about that? Because I don't have the
That's the one
details.
They just did, Diana. It's
Oh,
at 3
sorry,
o'clock.
I missed that.
3
Sorry,
o'clock.
sorry.
That's the one at Bank of America is the Peace Action.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
And Raging
Okay.
Granny.
The
Third-
Raging
Third
Grannies are
Avenue.
also meeting at, I believe it's Whole Foods at, on, what
Redwood
is,
City.
no, in Palo Alto, I believe, maybe at both,
Oh.
but I think they're doing the one in Palo Alto again. They have done it before. I can get that while you continue, and then I'll post it in the chat.
Mike, did you want to add anything more on?
Well, we're up to looks like about 120 signups. I don't know how many people are going to show up, but and then Channel 4 interviewed me today. I don't know if they'll really put it on or not, but it basically, why are we doing this? Yeah, oh my God, why are we doing this? But there you go. So I basically told them they succeeded with John. Where was it? Robert E. Lee failed. They were able to carry that stars and bars through Congress. So anyway, but yeah, we'll pass out flyers and be visible. I didn't want to do it at night because,
Right, right.
Thank you.
No, and there's quite a bit of traffic on El Camino at that time of day too. So it's going to be a good time. All right. Well, we're going to head on now to club business and talking about forming our new task forces for 2022. And so I hope some of you will stick around, and maybe this will be something that you really want to get involved in this coming year. We're missing a couple of our task force chairs, and we're hoping that they will be healthy and on their feet again soon. That's Gail and Gail and Greg Lowe. But I wanted to say, Diana, do you want to speak for a minute about social justice and what our task force has been doing and what we're looking to in the future?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was really had the potential tonight of being being like herding cats. So I congratulate our chair and our members and those who participated tonight on how this all went with our Congresswoman, our beloved Congresswoman Jackie Speier. So Gail Shadanovich and I are the co-chairs for the Social Justice Task Force, and we have been very involved in issues around the Sheriff's Office and around other issues of, I personally am a housing advocate, so I bring those issues about housing to the Social Justice Committee, and so DFA is a club that really gets out there and gives support to the community. So just to let you know that our task forces are specialized in different issues, and our members are encouraged to bring issues that are important to them to our task force meetings, and then we act on them in a variety of ways. And so just to let you know that anyone who is interested in social justice kinds of issues, ours is the task force to connect to. Thank you, Susie.
And you heard a little bit about some of the things that the task force has been active in, such as the help being involved with the Fixing San Mateo County, looking at some of the issues that are here local. All right, the next task force, Elsa, do you want to talk for a minute about healthcare? Because that is
Sure.
going to be coming up as a big one this year.
I was going to say a big one this year. In the last year, we mostly worked with Anna Eshu, who chairs the House Health Subcommittee, and had amazingly productive conversations. She who'd had a lot of healthcare background when she was on the county council in San Mateo County. but was being quite hesitant about Medicare for all. And we introduced her to some Stanford docs who are her constituents. And she ended up saying, you know, we just should make Medicare the public option. We should do it right now. We should do it this year, not wait till next year. Nothing happens in the second year of a Congress. Now we noticed it didn't quite happen this year, but elements of the bill Medicare for all have been put into both of the infrastructure bills. Now, granted, we only have one of the infrastructure bills through so far, but there are huge hopes that at least a version of the other one will go through. And there are some elements of the Medicare for all bill in that as well. So it is piecemeal, it is little by little, but to have her be gung-ho for making at least the current Medicare the public option was a big breakthrough. So that was point one. The other thing, but we will still push on that this coming year. The other thing is that now California has revved up in its year two of what is the AB 1400 bill. It's actually an act lovingly called CalCare, but it is California, the fifth largest economy in the world's version of Medicare for all. And interestingly, this year, so it's the second year of a 2-year bill. It has just been rewritten and reintroduced in the Assembly first. The Assembly Health Committee has to pass it by January 14th. The Appropriations Committee has to pass it by the 21st of January. And then the whole Assembly has to have voted on it by the 31st. So we are meeting with Mark Berman and Kevin Mullen, who are both definitely not on board yet about it. And we have Stanford docs in that meeting, as well as representatives from PDA, from DFA, yours truly, from the National Nurses Union, and every California healthcare group. And we're hoping to hold sway. We've got a lot of data on our side, and just hope that at least puts them in a neutral, willing to listen and maybe listen again before the actual vote position. The chair of the Health Committee in the Assembly is a dentist, Jim Wood. And it turns out that the American Dental Association has come out completely against Medicare for all, completely against CalCare. So all of us were going, oh. But a number of people have heard him say, yes, he would vote for it to get out of the Health Committee. So at least to go on to appropriations. So believe it or not, that's good news. So we'll see. The other great piece of news on this, and then I will shush, is that Governor Newsom himself set up I'm not going to think of the right word, a commission to look into the equivalent of Medicare for all. And every single person on that commission, which covered a vast panoply of interests in it, from physicians to medical device companies to nurses to people in the mental health arenas to more local government officials, every single person came through with fascinating elements to make sure they were part of it. And there was a big cadre who were helping show why including long-term care was very important in that also. And unfortunately, that commission report doesn't come out till February, of course, me wanting it by January 13th before the Health Committee votes. But to have that many people and under the guise of a Gavin Newsom commission really gave me hope going forward. I just wish it would be sooner and sooner, of course. So we don't have regular monthly meetings, particularly. We talk to people when it's relevant and when it's when we can be influential. We have a lot of side groups that we're related to, and anyone who is interested in joining that healthcare bandwagon, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Okay. Next group, the next task force is elections, and that has been chaired by Greg Lowe. And Marshall, I was hoping you would speak for that.
Yes, I definitely. We think that getting the elections task force running at least 100 miles per hour at this point is critical. And Bill Newell and I have agreed to work very strongly on this. Unfortunately, Greg Lowe can't be with us tonight, but in the past he has chaired it. But Bill and I are willing to charge forward if Greg, if maybe he'll be willing to still chair it, but we'll see. But anyway, there's so much to do. In the past, we feel that the Elections Task Force has actually been very successful in a number of issues. For example, we took an early role in supporting Katie Porter. We feel that in addition to California, there are people all over the country that can make a big difference, and every congressperson has one vote. So so it's not only California that we're concerned about, and we're putting together lists, and we hope anybody that has candidates that are true progressives that they want us to pay attention to, we'll investigate and support. So we need people on our task force to help us hone that list and strategize with us. So please let us know that you're willing to participate in the Elections Task Force. And this is no time for half measures, as we all know. We really have to be all in. Fascism is on the march, and we've got to stop it.
If I may, Susan and Marshall, I want to add real quickly to that report. A couple of years back, our committee was very active, and I think we did a lot of good work, and that was thanks to a lot of the members of DFA. So I strongly encourage as many of you to get involved with our committee as possible. Sitting in on meetings is helpful. Getting your feedback and your thoughts is helpful. We learn a lot from each other. But as Marshall says, this is a very serious election coming up. And as was discussed with Representative Speier just a few minutes back, it's going to be a really tough election year. And it's that much more important that we really do everything we can to try to be supportive of progressive people in Congress, because that's what's going to help save our democracy.
Right. And I just want to add, I note that Elsa put a plug to please contact her about the healthcare task force. Go ahead, if you're interested in a task force, you can go ahead and add a note to the chat that's the group you'd like to get involved with. We'll put together a list of everybody too as we move forward. And thank you for that on the elections.
And I'll put my email in so that if people want to sign up for the Elections Task Force, they can contact me directly, or Bill.
And we're gonna have a copy of the chat so that we can come back after after tonight's meeting and get back to people. So, okay, and then next up we've got climate change. Flavia, can you go ahead and give us a kind of recap of the last year and where you think we're headed to this year?
Yeah, sure. So, SMC DFA had an environmental task force. And then when the San Mateo chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby started up, like back in 2014, we kind of stepped back and let Citizen Climate Lobby in San Mateo grow, and it has grown. They have probably over 100 people at their monthly meetings. So that's good. There's a lot of people in San Mateo County that are very concerned about climate change. And because we're now in kind of, the needle is going into the red zone a little bit, and we only have 10 years, now less than 10 years, because we're now in 2022. This is urgent, but I would have to say that if we have a Republican-controlled Congress, we're not going to get any meaningful legislation about climate out of Congress. So I think it's really important to pay attention to this election. So I don't want to suck out any of the oxygen from that. But I do, have my own concerns about, keeping a livable planet. So what we've done this year is we started off supporting each other in the kinds of personal improvements we needed to make to, some of these improvements to fight climate change are a little bit capital intensive, like changing over from gas to electric in your home or putting up solar panels. And so, we got into those kinds of details early on. And then we also invited Chris Field to come and talk, and he is a member of the International Panel on Climate Change. And so we got his perspective, and I think it was very meaningful. And then we also participated in meeting with our legislators, Mark Berman and Kevin Mullen and Josh Becker. And if I had to do that over again, I think I would have wanted to meet with them earlier in the year while they were still in session. But as it is, this has been a really good year for California. They passed a lot of environmental regulations. And we also learned about the California Climate Change Center, which is an amazing website, very, very robust. And it gives a good recap of the legislative wins and losses regarding the environment in California. So that's a good website for you to go to if you want to see where California is at. And so there's a lot of learning to do, even though a lot of us are pretty knowledgeable about climate change. There's still a lot to keep on top of and to keep learning. And then we also did a little review. It's on our website. We have a page on our website of the outcomes, the good and the bad, that came out of Glasgow COP26, I guess it is. Was it COP25 or 26? And so we're going to start off looking at this book, which is Reengineering by Paul Hawken. And this is a really good source material for teaching curriculum and for sharing nature-based solutions and how we can all work together and scale up and coordinate with other countries and other entities. So we'll be looking at that this year. And then we'll be deciding together what next steps are once we get formed up in like the February, March timeframe. So I'll put my email in chat too if you are interested in joining.
All right. And now I'm going to open it up. Are there other, oh, Ashley, you've got your hand up.
I'll get unmuted. I just wanted to make some comments about our task forces, how wonderful they are, how committed they are, and talk about some of the accomplishments. And Flavia was talking about our meetings with our legislators. And one of the best things that our club has done in the 18 years of our existence is build wonderful relationships of respect with our elected officials. And the highlight, a highlight of every year is the meetings that we have with these legislators. This past year, we met with Kevin Mullen, and we met with Mark Berman, and we met with Josh Becker. And we meet with supervisors. We had 2 meetings with Dave Pine this past year. And we have built this reputation for hard work and for our progressive values, respect for our progressive values. So just kudos to the task forces. And I urge anyone who has, you can bring your pet project. You know, we all have this progressive overview, but each of us has one issue that we're particularly interested in. And you can bring those to the task forces and bring them to our meetings and elicit our support. We are very wonky. Oh, and I'm going to also say that Josh Becker is going to come back this year as our speaker. I think it's in March, isn't it?
Correct.
In
Yep.
March,
Yep.
Josh will be back.
And Casey just reminded me that you can join a task force before you become a member. So you can come and join our task force, see how it works, and then become a member at our annual in May. The other thing I want to talk about just briefly is, you know, right now we're still doing all our meetings on Zoom. And with luck, by summer, we hope to be meeting also in person. But we're going to continue with having it on Zoom or the equivalent, because what we're finding is, well, we've got Flavia in Oregon. We've got members that are outside of our local San Mateo County that still want to come to our meetings. And so we've seen the benefit of having these meetings. I can't think of the word, but televised, having them available so that more people can join us. And we are going to keep going with that, but we're really hoping that we can get back into that personal mode of getting together and starting with a social and having cookies, being able to talk to each other face to face, having that more personal communication. And that's something, you know, we've made it through the last 2 years, but it's really tough when you can't have that personal connection. So we're really hoping that comes back into play. And as far as our task forces, you know, going to Sacramento was something we used to do a lot. And it would be really nice if before the end of this legislative session, we're able to go up and lobby in person on our pertinent bills. And so that's something I'm kind of looking at. That's my goal, is getting us back to face, but we're still going to have, we're still going to have it with video so that we don't lose people. We want to continue to keep moving forward. So I wanted to open it up. Are there other ideas for task forces? Are there burning issues that we don't have as part of one of our groups today?
I see that Alice said voting rights in those 19 states, or we don't get any of these task forces off the ground. And that's very true. If Jackie suggested that we break HR 1 up to get some of these voting rights passed, I just hope that we can, it still has to be filibuster proof, because if they don't break the filibuster, then it still needs 61 votes to get over. So I don't see how how this is going to work.
Marshall?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the climate task force. Because as many of you know, I think the climate issue is issue number one. And this year is absolutely no time for half measures. Even though I spoke earlier about the elections task force, which without the elections of people that can make a difference and pushing voting rights, obviously we can't get very far on the national front. But the climate issue is such that we cannot push for half measures. We really have to go all in, to stop allowing buildings, for example, to continue to have non-electric gas, and building more cars with internal combustion engines and so on and so many other things. So I encourage, I wanted to, encourage people to please seriously participate in these task forces. We can make some difference, and all around the country, others are doing the same.
Elsa?
Speaking of making a difference and voting rights, there's also a group that we're related to called Reclaim Our Vote, which is part of something called the Center for Common Ground. And it has been one of the most effective groups I've ever in my life heard of, working in mostly southern states that have a significant number of electoral votes, that have at least 20% people of color in their total populations. And that in this last election had 1 or 2 sometimes Senate seats in play. And I highly recommend joining Reclaim Our Vote / the Center for Common Ground if you're anywhere interested in voting rights, because these states, including North and South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Texas, and Arizona now, and there can Alabama, there can be others added to that as well, have enough of us. There are 44,000 at last count, which is probably not updated yet, volunteers across the US, and there are really powerful, good organizers in that group. So if anyone is interested in that, please see Nancy Goodban or me, and we'll put more, Nancy Good already put her information in the chat. But we, even though we're not technically a task force, we are the liaisons on voting rights with SMC DFA. So please know we're not ignoring them. We just haven't had monthly meetings.
And so that's one thing that's really important, is that we don't have to have a task force dedicated to it, but we can have people that are actively working on it through other groups, pulling interested members in to events. We can, we put things like that into our newsletters every month. So it can be that instead of a task force, we simply have a, call it kind of a coordinating committee that keeps us posted on the activities, and that we can then pull into that. All right, Bill?
Just wanted to add a couple things to what you just said, Susan, and that is around voting. One, San Francisco People's Power, which some of us in this group are also part of, that has also been a really active group around voting, voter registration, voter rights, and particularly with trying to get more of the youth, younger people, particularly people coming out of high school now, and people in community colleges, making sure they're registered to vote, and B, that they can find ways to access to get more involved politically as voters. So that's another sort of initiative that's gone on, and that's gone on locally a lot here in San Mateo County through a lot of the schools and a lot of the libraries and places like that. The other thing I wanted to add to what Marshall was saying a little bit around climate, and that is that I think we also should keep our focus also locally as much as anything when it comes to things like climate, in terms of things like what we can do. Marshall was mentioning things like moving over to electricity, and that's been a big debate now in communities trying to make that transition, but we have to be careful about how that affects more fixed income, lower income folk in terms of that transition, and to make it work for them. And the other thing that I'm kind of getting a little more concerned and aware of is around recycling. And we know there was just legislation recently passed on more strict, I guess I'll use the word mandatory composting now in community recycling communities. And so I think that those are other types of things, other types of examples where we can try to impact on a local level around some of these same issues.
And Bill, I'll just add on, that Recology that so many of us, that's our local garbage and recycling. We've been doing this for years, and now it's going to be statewide having green bins, having your black, blue, and green bins so that everything as much as possible is recycled or composted. And, here's our, as the example.
Marshall
I want to go through.
Marshall wants to add on something. You got to unmute Marshall. Unmute Marshall. Unmute Marshall.
I
There he
know. Hold on. Oh dear. What happened here?
No, we can hear you, Marshall. We can hear you.
Oh, I couldn't, my screen moved and I couldn't find the, anyway.
We see you.
We do discuss a lot of things in these task forces, including on the climate task force, for example. We cover a broad range of things like population and so on. One of the issues that's really critical is the use of plastics. Plastics are fossil, most plastics are fossil fuel made. And we need to get, for example, legislation about dealing with that. So there's so many things that we need to tackle, so we hope that you'll join our effort.
All right. There was a couple questions I wanted to just kind of go through in the chat, asking about the climate task force, if this includes issues of population stabilization, which requires women's access to contraception and abortion. And that might actually end up being more of a social justice task force, would be my thought. And then again, we were talking about the voting rights, and Alice, you pointed out, most of the groups that are working on voting rights are nonpartisan. We are a Democratic club, and so that, but there's nothing that says that we cannot work on voting rights with a nonpartisan. We just have to make sure that when you're working with a group like that, that you're keeping your Democratic side of you, voting rights are voting rights, and they don't have a color. They don't have a partisanship. So, let's see. What else did we see in here? Oh, clean money campaign. That's another. This club has always been supportive of the clean money campaigns, and there I believe is another the ballot disclose act that is up now. And so if somebody particularly wants, we don't necessarily need a task force, but if we've got somebody that wants to monthly report on that, put things in our newsletters, make sure that everybody knows about Disclose Act. If there's something that comes up, we definitely want to know that. And there are lots of us that would be happy to participate. It doesn't necessarily need a task force. Ashley? You're muted.
I know. Okay. I would be happy to be the liaison. I seem to be the one that Nancy Neff calls whenever she wants something. So I think I would be very happy to do that. We worked with her. She was trying to get Kevin Mullen to sign on to the what's the act where they want to add the verbiage to the ballot about the propositions, and we actually did that. Remember at the Central Committee. At the Central Committee, wasn't a picnic. I guess it was
holiday party.
Oh, it was the holiday party. Yeah. And I actually went up to Kevin and mentioned it to him, and he said, "I'm all in." And he even agreed to co-author it. So yeah, we have a good relationship with the Clean Money campaign.
Well, and one of the things I want to point out is I actually said it earlier, it's that we have these relationships with our legislators, with our county supervisors. And it really is who you know. And it was much easier for Ashley to approach Kevin than for Nancy Neff. And yet she was able to facilitate getting them together on that. And if that's something the club is really good at doing, is being that go-between. All right, we've got Jim and Nancy. You've got a question? Or
Actually, not a question. I just want to reinforce what Flavia said. It turns out we were both reading the same book at the same time, which I find to be a phenomenal book for anybody who wants to know more about climate change and what we can do. It's very comprehensive, and I strongly encourage it. We got it at Kepler's recently, and I've been reading it ever since. Very broad in covering virtually every possible dimension of the climate change issue. Very helpful.
1 minute before I go to Mary, Alice, you asked if we could have the newsletter tell people to call the Senate office. Send me a blurb, and it goes out twice mid-month, and then the weekend before our meeting. So yes, we're always happy to put blurbs like that in the newsletter, whether it's on voting rights or any other issues. Mary.
I just want to say that we're all going to be really busy on the election stuff next year. I'll be on the elections committee, obviously. I mean, that's so important. But right now, the clean money there's not as much going on as there will be. And this January is super critical for the Disclose Act, the Ballot Disclose Act, which will be a real game changer, total game changer. Because, well, you know all about the ballot. So many of you have worked on this stuff. It's really important. But after January, there will be almost nothing to do until June. So but right now, if you can help, it would be fabulous. You can write to me or Nancy, because we have to get it through the Elections Committee and the Assembly Appropriations Committee. And that's step one. And that's now, like in the next couple of weeks.
That's a great one to put on the email, the talk email, is put a blurb out. Sure. And I encourage everyone to join the SMC DFA talk newsletter. It's just a group email to share, particularly things like that we need action now. This will go out before, because the newsletter is not going to go out for 2 more weeks.
Yeah. Oh, and also thanks to Ashley, because Nancy was thrilled when she got Kevin's endorsement. That was like so important. So thank you.
It was nice to make her day that day. It was a very pleasant day in the park. So, Nancy,
I think it was mostly just great timing, because suddenly he's saying, I want to take this issue onto the federal government, clean money, things had changed for him, and now he wasn't worried about hurting Mark Berman's feelings, right. And Mark isn't even the chair of that committee anymore. So it was great timing, but it felt good.
All right. Nancy Goodman.
Yes, my question was, if you see in the chat, Mukopadai asked, has DFA selected congressional districts to work on for 2022? So it's kind of a question for Marshall and Mary, probably, and
Bill Newell. Yeah, that'll be for the elections task force. And that's exactly what the task force is going to be doing, is looking at all the candidates. And so if you have a candidate that you think they should be looking at, this is exactly what being a member of the task force is all about, is bring those things.
Yeah, and I'd like to reiterate that we aren't just focusing on our congressional district or only California congressional districts and senators and others. We are looking everywhere, because it makes a big difference to get the right people in everywhere.
Right. There's also a question about how to join the newsletter. I just need to know your name and email address, and we'll get you on. And then if you want to join the club, smcdfa.org is our website. and there's a membership sign up on there. Either one though, we can always put you on to the newsletter first as a non-member.
Okay,
Okay.
so, Bob Page has a question.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're muted.
Are you talking about me?
That's it.
I'm Fran.
I just, I feel awfully disheartened by hearing Jackie Speier say that she didn't think the votes bill would pass, because that's been my first priority for quite a few years. And I know it probably isn't going to pass either, but just hearing her say it just was a downer. And I wondered how all of you feel about what we do now as a group here, the DFA. We can talk about the election in general for November and candidates and who to fund, but it's so disheartening. I've been responding with my cell phone and calling a lot when I get those messages to please call your senators, and I've called them so many times, it's just terrible. And then concerned that President Biden has such a limited number of hours that he answers the phone for phone messages. It's really shocking. And today, finally, he had some hours, and then they said it was not open today. So I just feel so discouraged about those bills, those two bills that the Senate needs to pass, and wonder if we have any way of talking about it, at least among ourselves, because we're really not talking about it because it's so awful.
But Marna, that number is open until noon, our time.
Yeah,
No,
I tried it
It
today.
was closed because of the snowstorm. All of Washington was closed down.
Yeah.
But it's only 4 hours, 3 days
It's
a
only
week.
3 days a week. It's a terrible system.
It really is. It's much worse than the previous presidents I've lived under. And it just seems like Biden has disappeared on the subject of these voting bills. And I would at least like to hear how the rest of you feel about this sort of coming off this week. We were going to try and in the Senate, and it just doesn't sound like
Consumer.
Yeah.
It is the single most disheartening thing as the most basic part of our Constitution, I think. And if you cannot one person, one vote, from which so much dominoes, it's we have friends in other countries who say, but you're the United States of America. Like, how can you be so wrong-headed at this moment? It's just so shocking.
And due to one or two senators, period.
Yeah, Alice.
I'm concerned that literally Kamala Harris has left the surface of the public debate. She is nowhere to be seen.
Oh.
Apparently she's doing some international crap, but I think that was just PR because she's had such a low
Ratings.
visibility and ratings.
Yeah.
So I think that special, I think it was CNN had, which I watched part of it, was window dressing. But I do think that there are people here like Andrea Dusteel, who ran her first campaign for in San Francisco. I think there are people who might be able to get to her. And some of you may very well have direct links because she supposedly is supposed to be responsible for the Voting Rights Act. So although I worked for her campaign to get her elected as the AG, she's just a huge disappointment to me. And I just would like to know if any of you have more personal contact than I do. I do know Andrea Dusteel, but she's kind of involved in some other things right now, but we really need to get to her. She has got to get off her ass and do something. Sorry for my language, but frankly, I am dedicating, I have become nonpartisan. The only issue for me is voting rights.
Yeah, me too.
All the rest of it is noise. The
Right.
environment is noise. You've got to get voting rights, and then we'll have all the environmental actions you ever wanted.
Right. That's how I feel too, Alice.
Yeah, the problem is for Biden and Harris is I think they're trying to distance themselves because they see it can't get passed
Mhm.
instead of going all in.
Exactly, exactly. And you know what? He should not have done one bloody thing till he had the voting rights done, and then he gets all the rest of the stuff done. He's he's one ass backwards. I'm sorry, I'm so angry that my voice.
Me
Very
too.
sorry.
So your language is really subdued compared to some of
Yeah. Alice, my mother, who's no longer on the planet, is clapping you the whole way, along with her daughter.
All right, I want to go back to Fran, who's had her hand up.
Yeah, well, Marshall answered part of my question was about the elections. I wasn't sure whether it was just going to be local or state or, but federal too. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
So I heard, I think it was somebody on MSNBC, I believe it was, that said there are 24 House members that have quit now, are quitting.
No.
What in the world are we going to do? Are there people ready to take their places? Jackie's leaving and 24 so far altogether are leaving the House.
Well, we don't know whether the others have done what Jackie has done. Jackie has put her support behind Kevin Mullen, but we don't know about the other 23 Democrats that are leaving, whether they have somebody in the wings. And we'll have to, what we have done in the past in the elections task force, and many of the members are actually on this call, and I hope they'll still be members. What we've done in the past is we've listed a lot of, for example, this time we list all the ones that are retiring and have split up the list and have people investigate whether they are supporting a progressive to replace them, or is there a progressive that is trying to get elected in those positions, even if that's not the one that the retiring person is supporting. That's the kind of legwork and digging that we do.
Yeah, I'm so concerned about all the good people are leaving, and it's going to wind up with all the crooks taking over.
Well, some of those are Republican crooks who are leaving Congress. So just.
Are you sure?
So there are 24 Democrats.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Democrats.
So Fran, maybe you could join the election task force. That's exactly where these discussions take place.
Yeah.
Yep. All right,
I'll
next
see.
up is Elsa.
Oh, shoot. Oh, I started writing in the chat instead, but I'll just say, because Mukhopadhyay has written a lot about voting rights and, what are we doing? How did we lose Maine, the Senate seat? What are we doing? And I have to say, it's organizations like Reclaim Our Vote, which goes into areas that the big parties don't go into, where there are sometimes 70% of the population who are eligible and not registered to vote. And it's not only because they're apathetic. A lot of the times in these particularly rural areas that actually have population, there is no infrastructure, and particularly in the southern states, they've just been bywaters. They've been overlooked for so many years that the people there aren't excited or don't even think it's possible. They don't think they count. So we've been this whole year setting up democracy centers. We have 11 of them very actively right now in those southern states, where we'll have them in a niche surrounded by 4 counties. So there's a physical space where they can train people, they can get them engaged and activated and understanding civics, getting their local legislators in there, and once a week being on a major national call with Andrea Miller, the founder, who brings in senators, brings in amazing journalists and analysts, and really, and you will not find that a bubble, I've got to say. That is a no holds barred. You'll hear some of the same language Alice is very good at in those meetings. And that group, I just have to say, has really shown they can add as much as 70% of of eligible voters who were not registered before, not only to register, but also to vote in elections. And we know from the data that in Georgia, for instance, 90% of the African Americans voted Democratic. 90% of the African American women voted Democratic. 80% of the African American men voted Democratic. And yes, there are those 20% and 10% left, but you will not be able to define another group of any segment of the population that votes more Democratic than those people of color. So I've got to say, if you're interested in getting people to register to vote and then also to vote, Reclaim Our Vote couldn't be a better avenue for you. And all of that, the link to Nancy is in the chat.
All right, Bill, you're up.
I couldn't unmute before, so that's what I put my hand up. Anyway, just to get back on, I just have to say something about Kamala because I think she's somewhat been stymied by the Biden administration. She has her limitations within the White House in terms of what she can do around voting rights. But in point of fact, I think she has been doing some things. I've seen her in forums talking about it. She's talked about it rather strongly. She's going to be on PBS nationally tomorrow in an interview with Judy Woodruff in PBS. So, I mean, she's definitely out there. She's definitely talking about stuff. It's just, I don't know how much power she can really wield within the White House to really push on voting rights other than to push Biden himself. But she's out there. And she's doing stuff on the ground with a number of people of color organizations.
Well, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we do. Anything else? Because it sounds like we've got some, yeah, we've definitely got a lot going on. And would like to see some really active task forces this year. And really looking forward to 2022. I'm trying not to become pessimistic. COVID is drawing me down, but politically, I gotta say, I'm actually feeling really optimistic. And I know Nancy Goodban had something up lately that, was talking about the same thing, that, feeling optimistic. And I think it was probably on Facebook maybe that you'd posted something, Nancy. And
yeah,
I have to agree. I see people getting tired of the shenanigans. And, I think that we've really got a chance as Democrats, but most importantly, we have got to get a message together, and we've got to be tooting our horn and saying, hey, do you like those, stimulus checks? Well, that was thanks to the Democrats, not the Republicans. Do you like, like this is happening? Do you like the things that are going? These are all things that only the Democrats have been voting for in Congress. And it's really important that Dems get their message out there, because I'm not hearing it. And so that's something we could probably start at the ground here, is can we come up with a good message that we're using in our meetings, on Facebook, that we're doing as solid messaging going out to everybody we talk to. And that, I think, is going to be the key in 2022, is you've got to have the right message, because you have to remember, Republicans are damn good at messaging, and they say exactly what their people want to hear. And it's all about, those damn liberals, and it's all, and this or that. And the Democrats are not coming back with something good. So, Marshall and then Fran.
I think one of the messages that we have to get across the country is that the reason that things aren't getting done is because the Republicans are blocking it. It's not because the Democrats aren't doing anything. It's because the Republicans have blocked every single thing. And we're not getting that message out.
But that's a negative message. And I'm going, you need to turn that into, that's one of the things, but here, look at all the things we've done. And we did it by ourselves because the Republicans didn't help.
But we're getting blamed. We're getting blamed, and we have to let them know why.
But more importantly, I think you got to get that positive message. Look at all the things we've done. And
both are true. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Fran?
I agree, Susie, with what you said. Yeah, I've been thinking that too. And people say, well, we shouldn't get down in the gutter like the Republicans. Well, I don't think we have to. I think all we have to do is throw the words back at them. They're accusing us of doing all the nasty, dirty things that they're doing. And all we got to do is turn it around. Or the Democrats that are speaking, get on the airwaves as much as possible. Every time they say something nasty, we've got to counter it. And one of the things I've noticed a lot, in fact, I wrote it, that they keep talking about the big lie, but nobody explains what the big lie is. And other than those of us that are involved all the time, I'm sure those that we really want to, whose minds we've got to change, don't even know what the big lie is, because nobody explains the big lie is that Trump said he won and he didn't. And we've got to say that Biden won by 8 million more votes because there's a lot more Democrats than there are Republicans. And that's a fact. And we've got to say that every time and the Democrats were eager to get out the vote, and they did. They came out in mass, and that's why he got 8 million more votes, and that's why Trump lost. And that's got to be explained over and over, I think. You can't just say the big lie. I'm sure most people don't even know what they're talking about anymore. So that's one of the things. But I agree, we've got to throw their nasty words back at them, that they're the ones doing those things, not us.
Well, and the big problem there is that they only listen to Fox News and other right-wing media. So they never hear that. I don't know how we tell them that. We have to tell them individually, I guess, because they're never going to watch CNN or MSNBC or any of the network news.
Well, I'm hoping they'll watch the hearings whenever they start.
Yeah, and many of them only have Sinclair News as their local news, which is as bad or worse than Fox.
Yeah.
Well, even the local news programs, that's where a lot of this can be said, and people and the Democratic legislators should be on the local news and speak up and say these things every night. Somebody should be on.
You'd be shocked at what a gigantic percentage of those local stations are owned by the large Sinclair conglomerates. And I used to be in media, and it's just absolutely shocking what's happening
I wondered about that, because they always include showing Trump saying some outrageous thing every time.
Exactly. And the other problem is when you say, well, at least, or somebody said, oh, well, at least maybe during the hearings, they'll get it, but they will watch it on Fox News, and Fox is really good at framing things the way they want it to be seen. And Alice Smith wrote a fascinating, one of her many cryptic notes in the chat, saying, don't write each other, write letters to the editor. And there too, if you can write letters or do videos, 90% of people get their information from video, not from reading. So that's one interesting data point. If you can do those kinds of things in media that people who are either wondering or are on the other side of this discussion actually pay attention to, that's crucial for us to think of. A New York Times editorial doesn't, or a letter to the editor doesn't, unfortunately, necessarily have the power that we'd like to think it does.
I have something to say. Am I muted? No.
We hear you.
No. This is just so simple, but to me, the Democrats should present themselves as representing the commitment to truth. And you could go up and down your ballot and vote for the candidate that seems to most believe in truth and the least in lying. And I just think that it's too simple to say, but you're asking what positive thing the Democrats stand for. And to me, it's they stand for speaking the truth, acting by the truth, committing to the truth, and they don't lie.
You know, the only sad part about that is that there was a talk with Jackie about the ethics, and if only all Democrats were as squeaky clean as we'd like. And they're not all Jackies.
No.
They're not all ethically pure.
But we haven't been corrupted here.
Unfortunately, the other side is shouting that they're the ones telling the truth. So you have to really be specific. I think
we can be specific, and I don't think they can. Anyway, that was just my take.
Couple points here. The one is the reason that I believe that Biden won was because of a network, an incredible network of a lot of grassroots organizations all over this country, including places like Center for Common Ground, like Elsa's noted tonight. But there's a number of those groups out there. Many of them we don't even know, and you may never know. But you need to have the faith that what's really brought about social change in this country, I think, is the work that's been done at the grassroots level, and that's why Biden won. That's why the Dems won, and that's what's going to make a difference in the next election. Is how well we organize, how well we work at the grassroots level, and with our networks and support. That's why Warnock and Ossoff got elected in Georgia. And one other thing I want to quickly say is that I heard somewhere, it was Jim Clyburn or another one of the African-American people in Congress that have been involved in civil rights movements, is that the history of civil rights change, voting rights, and all those things in this country have only come about after there's been a lot of bleeding and sacrifice in this country. Voting rights and things of that sort started to happen after Selma, after the march, after Dr. King was assassinated. These are the kind of things that happen historically. So I know we're in sort of sounds like we're in a really dark time right now, but I think we have to look at that right now as a pivotal moment for us to that we can seize and make some change for.
Okay. Any other comments at the moment?
Happy
Well, I
New
do know
Year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah. Before we head out, I know we've got a couple candidates with us tonight that would like to at least say hello and have a minute or so to introduce themselves. I see, let's see, where did I just lose you?
James Coleman is here.
Yes, and then also David Pollock. James, do you want to go ahead and say hello first?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. So my name is James Coleman. I'm currently on the South San Francisco City Council, and I am running for state assembly. So more about myself, I was born and raised in South San Francisco in a working class family. And when I was 5 years old, my father suffered a traumatic injury that left him paralyzed from the waist down. And my mother had to take on 2 jobs in order to make ends meet. And so growing up, this made me want to study biology to learn how people could heal, as well as study government to learn how we can make sure our government works for all of us and not just a very few. And so I went off to Harvard University after graduating from high school in South City, where I did study regenerative biology with a minor in government. And then the pandemic quickly cut that short. In the middle of my junior year, I was evacuated off of campus, went back to my hometown of South San Francisco, where I saw many of the inequities really really wreak havoc in our communities with regards to housing, healthcare, childcare, and so on, all while the threat of climate change really threatens to uplift many of our residents. So, and then, the murder of George Floyd happened, and we saw that, South San Francisco was not much different from many of those other cities experiencing police brutality. We had a police killing of our own. A young 15-year-old named Derek Gaines was a Black child and also killed by South City PD in 2012. And Derek Gaines was only 3 years older than I was when he was tragically killed. And so, we went to the city council really advocating for change and for accountability. And when we did not see that, I decided to run for city council to really, hold our elected officials accountable and bring much needed progressive change to the city council of South San Francisco. And South San Francisco, we've been really leading on building, more affordable housing, specifically mixed income social housing, so that we can really treat housing as a human right. We recently passed and sent a letter to the state legislature, really advocating for AB 1400, single payer healthcare for all Californians. And we've also been leading on climate change, really passing a REACH code covering all new residential buildings to be required to be all electric when they're built. And this is not through the city, and here's another thing, it's not through the city council, but through a citizens initiative. We have a coalition in South San Francisco really working to put a measure on the ballot for next year that will tax the big biotech and the big corporations in South San Francisco and use that money to fund universal childcare for every single South San Francisco resident. And now in Assembly, I'm running a progressive campaign. I am running a corporate-free campaign, and I really want to make sure that we are ensuring that the largest corporations and the billionaires are paying their fair share and that we are adequately supporting the working families of San Mateo County. I'd be honored to have your vote and your support, and I'm going to put my information down in the chat for anyone who wants to, learn more, talk to me later in the future, and so on. Thank you.
Terrific.
Bravo.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. And David Pollock. David, are you there? Would you like to say hello for a minute?
You're muted, David. Oh.
Okay. Well, we'll give him a chance to come back in a second. I think we're pretty much open to, are there any announcements?
Are we going to have any time limits on this, Susie?
I think we were okay because James, that was maybe 1-2 minutes, and that was perfect.
Can we have an update from Marshall on COVID?
I prepare one. Everybody is probably aware of some of the issues, like the Omicron is skyrocketing. And the good news on it, of course, is that it appears to be a milder infection than Delta virus, but unfortunately, it's 5 to 10 times more infectious. So even if it were only a fifth as deadly or hospitalizing, the numbers are still heading northward. They're going up. There was supposedly going to be authorization for boosters for 12 to 15-year-olds today. I don't know whether that actually got authorized, but the word is that was going to happen. There's also a third dose being recommended for those greater than 5 years old, and a booster after 5 months instead of 6 months is being approved and recommended. The Pfizer and Merck drugs, the demand is outstripping the supply, but it seems to be very effective if done properly and early. But they just can't crank out enough at the moment. Everybody should be aware, though, that flu is on the rise. During the beginning, a year ago, because people were not circulating so much, the flu was also down. But it's now on the rise, and there are even people that are getting doubly infected, whether that's going to cause more hospitalizations is still not really unknown. Interesting number is that over 8 billion doses of vaccine have been given worldwide. Unfortunately, it's not uniformly being given. There are certain areas that still are not getting enough vaccinations going in. For example, many places in Africa and some in Asia. The unhappy part, it's all unhappy, but there have been over 800,000 deaths due to COVID in the US. We lead the world, that's an unfortunate record. And the infections are increasing and hospitalizations are, of course, are increasing. The peak that we're seeing with Omicron right now is largely because Thanksgiving holidays, everybody got together. So we saw a peak 2 to 3 weeks after that. And then Christmas and New Year's hit and everybody got together and traveled. And so we're going to continue to see the rise probably for at least another week or two before it goes back down. And many hospitals around the country are being overwhelmed, even though it is somewhat milder when it's Omicron. But unfortunately, since the numbers, as I mentioned earlier, are so much higher, you still get so many hospitalizations. And unfortunately, we're probably going to, the lag in dire effects has not yet hit. As many of us who watch the news and so on know that there's been some confusion about the recommendations for people that test positive. The original recommendation is that if you test positive, please stay isolated for 5 days after you after your symptoms occur, if you've been vaccinated and boosted, and then you can go back out into the world. They didn't recommend testing at that point. A lot of logistics reasons for that, and lots of false positives, false negatives in the testing. But there's still a lot of confusion about what people should do. Personally, I think if you come down with COVID and are positive, you should probably stay out longer, but most people can't afford to do that. So it's a real conundrum for the whole population. Some of us can afford to do it, many cannot, and it's a real financial issue. On the other side, there is talk quietly going on in Congress about a new round of relief funding that's being discussed. And there may even be enough Republicans that are willing to support it, but that remains to be seen. So it's still fluid, it's still awful that we're going through it, but I think we have a long haul. It's not going to be over for a while. If the Omicron does cause a boost in immunization for people that have already been vaccinated and boosted, it is possible that it will block the epidemic and some variants that may come on. So that's the only silver lining on Omicron. But again, it remains to be seen how that plays out. So that's what I can say. If you have any questions, I could try to answer.
All right, thanks, Marshall. David Pollock, are you there? Would you like to? There you are. Say hello.
Sorry, had some technical issues and I stepped away just as I was called on. So
yeah, of course.
But thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is David Pollock. I am a longtime community activist. I know many of you and have worked with many of you on a number of issues that are near and dear to our hearts. I am also as of a month or two ago, a full-time substitute teacher. And now I'm working in the Redwood City School District through the end of the year as a language arts teacher, which has been a lifelong passion of mine. And I'm glad that I finally get the chance to give back in my community. So I'm running for assessor, county clerk, recorder, chief elections officer, because I feel that a lot of the themes that we're talking about regarding civic engagement, civic empowerment, and having government that is responsive to and reflective of the residents of our citizens in the country is just as true and even more so in San Mateo County. The population of San Mateo County is 63.9% is people of color, but somehow our government, whether it's our elected leadership board of supervisors, in general city councils, and even the position that I'm running for, it doesn't not seem to be at all responsive to the majority of citizens or reflective of their interests. And that's why I'm running. I feel that for too long, it's been a sort of a caretaker position where it's just, if you're a member of a dynasty and you pay your dues and you kiss the ring, you can go from city council member to board of supervisors and get a nice cushy job where you don't have to do much, or you can't do much harm by putting them in the assessor's office for the last 12 years. And before him, his dad was in office for 20 years. And Warren Slocum was in there a little bit in between. But like Jackie Spears talked about voting rights and voting access in San Mateo County, that all the good things that we have in San Mateo are due to folks like Kevin Mullen and Mark Berman, who's the current head of the elections committee, and very little has been done locally with that office. And I think it can be a lot more.
All right, thank you very much, David, and we'll look forward to hearing more.
Thank you.
Are there any other announcements? Okay, well, I see we're a little bit early tonight, but this has been a terrific evening, and I wish we'd had longer to talk with Jackie, because boy, that could be a really good conversation. But I'm thrilled that she's going to be active locally. And I think we need to get her as a member of SMC DFA. And maybe we can get her to be an active member. So we'll keep up the good work. And I think we're off to a good start for 2022. Yes, and wouldn't it be nice to have Jackie come back as a speaker?
Annually.
Yeah, actually, I think that would be terrific, because whatever she's doing in the community, we're going to want to know, because we're going to want to be involved. So I'm hoping that that'll be a really good partnership moving forward. And I love the idea of the foundation working on San Mateo County. We really need that again. And she sees that missing piece and is there ready to fill that place. So, yay. Okay, and I'm going to say Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a great evening, and we'll see you next month. And if not, there's chatting in between on email.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Happy New
Thank you.
Year.